Okay, before anything else, I need to tell you something about brain training apps. They do not work. Not the way the advertisements imply. You can get remarkably good at a specific brain training game. That improvement almost never transfers to your actual memory or your actual life or anything happening outside that app. This has been tested repeatedly, and yet an enormous industry keeps selling it to you anyway. So if that does not work, what actually does? Real memory research. Peer-reviewed, replicated, occasionally counterintuitive findings from cognitive scientists who have spent decades figuring out how memory actually works. Here are 5 methods, all backed by real studies, and none of them involves a subscription. Method 1. Test yourself instead of rereading. Here is what almost everyone does when trying to remember something. They read it, then they read it again. Maybe they highlight it, maybe a third pass. It feels productive. It is one of the least effective ways to actually retain information. In 2006, psychologists Henry Roediger and Jeffrey Karpicke at Washington University in St. Louis ran an experiment that has been replicated many times since. Students studied prose passages, then split into 2 groups. One group restudied the material, the other put it away and tried to recall it from memory, with nothing in front of them. When they were tested 5 minutes later, the group that had reread the material did better. Rereading felt like it was working, and in the short term it was. But when the same students were tested 2 days later, everything flipped. The group that had reread the material had forgotten 56% of what they originally knew. The group that had tested themselves had forgotten just 13%. The students who reread the material had also felt more confident going into that final test. They were wrong about their own memory. Which means every flashcard you have ever used correctly was doing more for you than an entire chapter of highlighted textbook. Sorry to the highlighters, I was one of you. Method 2. Space it out. In the 1880s, a German psychologist named Ebbinghaus Ebbinghaus ran a series of experiments on himself, memorizing lists of meaningless syllables and testing how quickly he forgot them. What he found became known as the forgetting curve. Memory decays fast. Most of what you learn in a single sitting is largely gone within a day or 2 if you never revisit it. But he also found something else, and more than a century of research since has confirmed it repeatedly. If you space your review sessions out over days instead of cramming them into one sitting, the same total amount of study time produces dramatically better long-term retention. This is called the spacing effect, and it is one of the most consistently replicated findings in all of cognitive psychology. Cramming feels efficient. It gets you through tomorrow's test. It is nearly useless a month later. Spacing feels inefficient in the moment. It's the reason some people can still recall a language or an equation a decade after they learned it. Method 3. Build a palace. This technique is genuinely ancient, credited to the Greek poet Simonides of Chios around 500 BCE. It has survived 2,500 years for one simple reason: it works. The method of loci, also called the memory palace, involves mentally placing what you want to remember inside a familiar physical space: your childhood home, your daily walk to work. You imagine moving through that space, encountering each item along the route. This sounds like a party trick. In 2003, neuroscientist Eleanor Maguire at University College London studied competitive memory athletes, the people who could memorize a shuffled deck of cards in minutes, using brain imaging. Her findings were published in Nature Neuroscience. Their brains showed no structural differences from anyone else's, no unusually large hippocampus, no exceptional raw intelligence. The difference was entirely the technique. 9 out of 10 reported using the method of loci, and their brain scans showed them activating the hippocampus and spatial navigation regions far more than untrained participants did. This is not a talent you either have or do not have. It's a technique. Anyone can use it. Method 4. Go for a walk. In 2011, a research team led by Kirk Erickson at Pittsburgh University published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that should have been bigger news than it was. 120 older adults were split into two groups for a full year. One group walked briskly for about 40 minutes several times a week, nothing extreme. The other group did light stretching. At the end of the year, everyone's brain was scanned. The walking group's hippocampus, the brain region most directly responsible for forming new memories, had grown by 2%. The stretching group's hippocampus had shrunk by 1.4%, which is the normal pattern of age-related decline. The exercise had not just slowed the decline, it had reversed roughly 1 to 2 years of it. The researchers also found that the volume increase was tied to higher levels of BDNF, a protein that supports the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus. Somewhere in a lab in Pittsburgh, an entire building of neuroscientists watched a brisk walk outperform whatever you were hoping a supplement would do for you. Method 5. Protect your sleep. Here's the one people already suspect and still ignore anyway. Memory formation doesn't finish the moment you learn something. It continues afterward, during sleep, while your brain gradually moves information from short-term storage in the hippocampus into more permanent long-term storage in the cortex. Researchers, including Robert Stickgold at Harvard Medical School, have spent decades studying this process. Their findings are consistent. People who sleep after learning something new consistently retain more than people who stay awake for an equivalent stretch of time, even when the awake group is not doing anything mentally demanding in between. Slow wave sleep, in particular, appears to be when this transfer happens most intensely, which means the study session you pulled at 2 a.m., the one that felt productive because you were still awake and still reading, may have actively worked against you, not because you were tired, because you skipped the part of the process where the learning actually gets saved. Here's what all 5 of these methods have in common. None of them are exciting. None of them come in an app. None of them will be sold to you with a subscription model or a mascot. Testing yourself instead of rereading, spacing your review sessions out, using a spatial structure to organize what you're trying to remember, walking, sleeping. The actual science of memory improvement is almost entirely made up of things that feel too simple to be the answer, which is probably why so many people skip past them looking for something that feels more sophisticated instead. If this video helped you rethink how you actually learn, subscribe. Every week, we go into the science behind the things you thought you already understood. Leave a like if this one stayed with you. Until next time, stay curious.